You can have the undeniable facts, a decade of experience, and, the perfect solution to the company's biggest problem, and still sound entirely incompetent the moment you open your mouth.
Welcome to the deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Today, we're talking about a massive gap that you have almost certainly felt at some point in your professional life. It's the gap between having the right answer in your head and actually sounding like you have the right answer when you speak.
Right, because there's just a world of difference between feeling confident and sounding confident.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because having the knowledge isn't enough if your language is subconsciously projecting doubt, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's a universal struggle. I mean, you might know exactly what needs to be done, but the way you deliver that knowledge, the specific structural language choices you make, it ultimately determines whether the room hears certainty or whether they hear hesitation.
Yeah, they either hear authority or they hear an apology.
So, to figure out how to close this gap, we've fed a massive stack of communication research, linguistic analyses, and corporate coaching transcripts into the deep dive today. Our mission is to figure out exactly how to bridge that gap.
And the good news we found is that sounding confident isn't some magical aura you're simply born with.
Right. It's not about being the loudest person in the room or having this booming voice.
No, not at all. And it's definitely not about employing manipulative tricks or, putting on some mask of fake confidence.
Thank goodness, because that's exhausting.
It really is. What the research reveals are 12 highly learnable language patterns. These are structural grammatical choices that accurately represent the knowledge you already possess, without all the verbal clutter that just leaks your authority.
But before we can start building those new confident habits, we kind of have to do some demolition work.
We do. We need to eradicate the weeds.
Right. So let's look at the actual words we use. What are the specific phrases that drain authority?
Well, in the linguistic data, there are 7 exact phrases that act as absolute confidence killers. And the tricky part is, you probably use several of them every single day without realizing it.
I'm bracing myself.
Yeah, they sound like this. I'm not sure, but, or, this is probably a stupid question, but,
Man, yeah.
then there's, I might be wrong, but, and a classic email opener, sorry to bother you, but,
Oh, that one hurts. I type that all the time.
it does hurt. Then we have the post-statement checks, like, does that make sense?
Wow, yeah.
Or the minimizers, like, I just wanted to, and finally, the qualifiers. Things like, kind of, or sort of.
Listening to those all in a row, I kept thinking about this analogy. Using those phrases is like taking a stunning 5-star gourmet meal
Uh-huh.
that you spent hours perfecting in the kitchen and serving it to your guests on a soggy paper plate.
Oh, I like that.
Right. It instantly minimizes the value of everything it touches. I mean, the steak might be incredible, your idea might be brilliant, but the presentation makes people doubt the quality before they even take a bite.
That is a brilliant way to visualize it. And the crucial question is why we instinctively reach for those soggy paper plates. Why do we do this?
Right. Why do we sabotage ourselves?
Psychologically, it's a preemptive defense mechanism. When you say, I'm not sure, but, you are literally signaling to your audience that they shouldn't fully trust what follows.
Wow.
You're negotiating against your own credibility to soften the blow in case you're rejected. I mean, if your idea is shot down, well, you already said you weren't sure.
Yeah, or the word just, like I just wanted to check in. It physically shrinks your presence in the room. You're trying to be polite, but you end up sounding like you don't believe you have a right to take up space.
Exactly.
So what's the replacement pattern? How do we serve the meal on a proper ceramic plate?
The linguistic research is very clear on this. You state what you know clearly, and you invite questions at the end, not before.
No preemptive apologies.
No, you do not preemptively apologize. You deliver the statement, and then let it stand on its own merit.
Which perfectly brings us to the structure of confident assertions. Because it turns out, confident English makes clear statements first, and then provides the reasoning.
Right. Anxious English does the exact opposite.
Let's look at how the anxious hedge structure actually operates. It usually sounds something like, I'm not totally sure, but I think maybe the reason this happened could be that the timeline was too tight.
You can hear the hesitation dripping from every clause.
Yeah, it's painful.
The speaker is hiding behind qualifiers. Contrast that with the confidence structure. It strips out the hedges and relies on a very specific 3-part architecture.
Okay, what is it?
Claim, then evidence, then implication. So instead of that rambling sentence, you say, the issue was the timeline. It was too tight for the scope of work, which created cascading delays. Here's what I recommend we change.
Let's apply that formula to a higher stakes scenario. Let's say you're dealing with budget cuts that might affect your team's job.
Oof, yeah, that's a tense room.
Exactly. So first, the claim. You simply say, the current strategy isn't working. You don't soften it with, I kind of feel like. You just state the claim.
Right.
Next, the evidence. Conversion rates have dropped 18% over 3 months. And finally, the implication. We need to revisit the targeting approach today. Claim. Evidence. Implication.
It's powerful. And if you look at the transcripts of highly confident speakers, you'll notice something striking about the architecture of those sentences. They are remarkably short.
I noticed that too. Short sentences signal confidence. Long, meandering, hedged sentences signal anxiety. Why is the brain interpreting sentence length as a measure of authority?
Because a long sentence gives you room to hide. When you speak in long, breathless paragraphs, you're constantly adding caveats, trying to cover every possible exception so no one can prove you wrong.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
A short sentence forces you to commit to your thought. It says to the room, I stand by this statement.
Okay, shortening your sentences and using the claim evidence implication model works perfectly when you're just speaking to the room. But reality isn't a monologue.
No, it's really not.
What happens the moment someone interrupts you? Let's say I'm a notoriously difficult client, and I just cut you off to say, your data is entirely wrong.
Right, that defensive instinct is going to kick in immediately.
This is exactly where most professionals lose their footing. When someone challenges your position, the first 5 seconds of your response dictate the entire rest of the exchange.
Let's role play this so you can hear the difference.
I'm the difficult client, and I say, your targeting approach is completely ignoring our core demographic. Here's the natural defensive response most of us would give.
Oh, well, I mean, I could be wrong. I was just thinking that maybe based on...
The room instantly stops taking you seriously.
Yeah, you've entirely collapsed under the pressure.
Now, let's reset. You challenge me. Here is the confident response. That's a fair challenge. My thinking is based on the Q3 metrics we gathered last month. I'd be interested to hear what's driving your view.
Wow, it's a massive difference. But let me push back a little here. My instinct when someone attacks my work is to get defensive or, to soften my response so I don't sound like a dictator.
Sure.
Doesn't stating things this directly, like my thinking is based on Q3 metrics, run the risk of sounding too aggressive or combative? How do we balance authority with approachability?
It's a really common fear, but the data shows it's a misconception. Clarity is actually kind. Caveats are confusing. Let's analyze what that confident response actually did in those first 5 seconds. First, it acknowledged the challenge without agreeing to it. That's a fair challenge.
Right.
Second, it maintained your position with evidence. My thinking is based on the Q3 metrics. And third, it redirected to a dialogue. I'd be interested to hear what's driving your view.
Oh, I see.
This demonstrates deep intellectual confidence. You aren't being aggressive. You're showing that you can hold your ground while remaining genuinely open to new information.
So that is how you handle being challenged. But what about when you need to be the one challenging someone else, especially senior leadership?
That's tough.
We looked at the specific phrases the research identifies for confident disagreement. Things like, I see this differently, or I'd push back on that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I agree. That doesn't quite match what I'm seeing. And I think there's another way to look at this.
Those are incredibly elegant tools. They own the disagreement completely. The alternative is either pretending you agree when you secretly don't, or burying your disagreement in so many apologies that nobody realizes you are actually objecting.
Right, which defeats the purpose.
Saying, I see this differently is just a factual statement of your perspective. It naturally opens up the conversation rather than shutting it down.
It's just honest. Which brings us to another area of honesty. What to do when you genuinely don't have the answer.
Well, this is a big one.
Non-confident speakers turn I don't know, into a Greek tragedy. They do the deeply apologetic version, I'm so sorry, I'm not sure about that, I should probably know this. Or worse, the adrenaline spikes, and they just guess.
Which absolutely destroys your credibility the second the room finds out you guessed.
Exactly.
Let's look at the confident alternatives. You can say, I don't have that information with me right now. Let me get back to you with an accurate answer rather than guess.
I love that.
Or simply, that's outside my current knowledge. I'll find out and come back to you.
If we really break that down, why does that work? Why doesn't the room think you're incompetent for not knowing?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, a confident I don't know is the ultimate sign of intellectual honesty.
Interesting.
In many corporate cultures, not knowing is viewed as a fatal weakness. But paradoxically, when you deliver it without apologizing for your own existence, It dramatically increases the room's trust in you.
Yeah.
They realize that if you are perfectly willing to admit when you lack data, then whenever you do make a claim, it must be backed by absolute certainty.
That is fascinating. So we've covered the actual words to use and avoid, but there's a whole other layer to the research. We have to look at how these words are being delivered.
Yeah.
Because it turns out the most immediately impactful technique isn't vocabulary at all. It's silence.
Pace and pause. This is where the physical reality of speaking meets the psychological perception of confidence. The speed of your delivery changes everything.
Because speaking too quickly is an almost universal signal of anxiety. It's like you're rushing to get the words out before someone cuts you off. You're rushing to fill a silence before you're even done thinking.
Precisely. You're subconsciously telling the room, I know I'm taking up your valuable time. I'm sorry, I'll be quick.
Ouch.
People who pause before speaking, however, signal that their words are considered. They signal that they're worthy of holding the floor.
There's a story from the coaching transcripts we reviewed that perfectly illustrates this. Let's talk about May.
Oh, May's story's great.
Right. May is a brilliant financial analyst. She has the knowledge. She always had the knowledge. But in high-stakes meetings, she had this deeply ingrained habit of phrasing everything as a question when she actually meant to make a definitive statement.
Right.
She would sit forward, rush her words, and say, I was kind of thinking that maybe the budget might need to be looked at.
There's the soggy paper plate again.
Exactly, when what she really meant was the budget needs to be reviewed. So May started working on these specific structures. She practiced the claim, evidence, implication model. She practiced shortening her sentences.
Good for her.
In her next major strategy meeting, she waited for her moment. Instead of rushing in, she took a deliberate, visible breath, a full beat of silence. And she reduced her rambling 12-word apology down to just 4 words of intention. The budget needs to be reviewed.
And what was the outcome?
The room didn't collapse. No one called her aggressive. Her manager simply looked at her, nodded, and immediately replied, I can take that to the CFO this week.
Wow. That is a profound realization.
Yeah.
The financial expertise was always there inside Mai's head, but 12 words of apology and hedging had been effectively hiding it from everyone else. 4 words of intention, delivered at a deliberate pace, completely unlocked her authority.
It's incredible how fast the perception changes. And May's success in that meeting naturally leads us into navigating other highly pressurized professional environments. How do we apply this to job interviews, client pitches, or presentations to senior leadership?
You need language that explicitly projects authority, grounding your confidence in real credibility.
Yeah.
The coaching notes highlight specific anchor phrases for this.
Right. Phrases like, based on my experience with X, that tells the room your confidence isn't arbitrary, it's earned.
Exactly.
Or I'm confident that, which directly states your conviction. The evidence suggests, which shows you're analytical, not just opinionated. My recommendation is where you firmly own the position. I'd argue that, which signals you're intellectually engaged with the material. And my personal favorite, what I know for certain is, which beautifully separates the facts you have locked down from the variables that are still unknown.
These phrases act as anchors. I mean, in high-pressure situations, your brain naturally wants to panic and hedge. These phrases keep you grounded in your actual expertise.
But wait, we don't just communicate by speaking. A massive portion of our professional lives happens behind a keyboard. And the research highlights that we do a tremendous amount of damage to our own credibility in emails.
Written authority is its own unique challenge because you can't see the other person's face and you can't rely on your tone of voice to convey warmth. Well, people overcompensate.
I really do.
They are terrified of sounding cold or demanding, so they flood their emails with hedges.
The email killers, we all know them. We sit at the keyboards, type out a clear request, and then slowly add apologies until it sounds like this. I was just wondering if maybe, or sorry to bother you, but, or this might be a silly idea, but...
It's so common. The confident email formula is incredibly straightforward, yet it feels terrifying to execute at first. You use direct subject lines. You state the purpose of the email in the very first sentence, and you strictly forbid yourself from using apologies for existing.
Let's compare them. Instead of typing, sorry to bother you, but I was just wondering if maybe you had time to answer something about Q3, you take a breath and just write, I have a question about the Q3 timeline. That's it.
That's so much better.
Or instead of, I was kind of thinking maybe it might be worth considering potentially moving the deadline. You simply write, I recommend we move the deadline to Friday.
It respects the reader's time, and it highlights your competence. You're treating the recipient as an equal rather than a superior. You're begging for a favor.
So we've perfectly structured our spoken assertions. We've drafted the ultimate apology-free email. But there is one final layer we have to unpack to truly master this. The research calls it paralinguistics. So help me understand this. We're moving out of the dictionary and into the physical body.
Exactly. English confidence is not just about the words printed on a transcript. It's paralinguistic. It's about how your physical body produces the sound.
Okay, break that down for us.
Let's look at vocal confidence.
Yeah.
First, there's volume. You need to speak at a level that comfortably fills the physical space. Second is rate, which we discussed, intentionally speaking slower than your anxious brain is telling you to.
Right.
Third is variation, avoiding a monotone drone, because varying your pitch signals that you are genuinely engaged with your topic. And finally, pitch itself.
Let's talk about pitch, because this is fascinating biologically. Speaking at a slightly lower register signals more authority than a high pitch. Why is that?
It comes down to human anatomy. When you're anxious, your muscles tense up. That includes your vocal cords. Tight vocal cords produce a higher, thinner pitch.
That makes total sense.
Yeah, and when you are relaxed and confident, your vocal cords relax, which naturally lowers your pitch. The human ear instinctively translates a lower pitch as a relaxed, confident speaker.
And along with the vocal signals, there are the physical ones. Sustaining eye contact during your key statements, actually looking directly at the people you are speaking to rather than your notes. But there is one crucial paralinguistic focus here that we absolutely have to highlight.
Yes, the extreme danger of rising intonation at the end of your statements.
Right. In English, falling intonation where your pitch drops at the end of the sentence means you are making a declarative statement. Rising intonation means you are asking a question.
Exactly.
But so many people will let their pitch drift up at the very end of a factual sentence. So the strategy isn't working becomes the strategy isn't working.
It's commonly known as uptalk, and it is devastating to your authority.
I was trying to figure out why uptalk feels so wrong in a professional setting, and I thought of this analogy. Using uptalk is like driving a car. And right as you navigate a really complex turn, you take your hands off the steering wheel, offer it to the passenger, and say, "Is this right?"
That's exactly what is happening. You turn every confident claim into a plea for validation. You are literally asking your audience for permission to believe your own data.
It's wild when you think about it like that.
And to be fair, there's a very common reason for this. Especially for non-native English speakers, or even native speakers trying to be highly collaborative, uptalk is often used subconsciously to check for comprehension.
Oh, I see.
You raise your pitch to see if the listener is following along. But the listener doesn't hear a comprehension check. They hear a lack of conviction.
I am so excited to share our final story today because it ties all of this paralinguistics, structure, and language together beautifully. Let's look at James.
Yes, Cheese.
James is a senior director who had been prepping a massive career-defining pitch for his board of directors for 3 straight weeks. He knew every number, he knew every risk, he knew every counterargument.
He had the absolute expertise.
Exactly. But when he practiced his presentation out loud, it felt entirely wrong. He was naturally hedging everything to soften the ask. He was saying things like, "I was kind of thinking we might want to consider potentially expanding the market share."
A classic case of hiding his own hard-earned knowledge behind a wall of qualifiers.
So after reading up on these exact techniques, he scrapped the script and started over. He rebuilt his entire pitch into clear, direct statements using the claim, evidence, implication structure.
And how did it sound?
Listen to the power of this new version. "The market is moving faster than our competitors have responded to. Our window is 12 months. The investment I'm proposing returns 3x within 2 years based on comparable launches. I recommend we proceed."
Notice how James applied the paralinguistic techniques there too. He didn't just change the words. He practiced taking a full physical pause right before saying, "I recommend."
Yes.
And critically, he practiced forcing a falling intonation at the end of every single sentence. He kept his hands firmly on the steering wheel.
He practiced it until it was pure muscle memory. So cut to the actual boardroom. He's delivering the pitch. The tension is high. After the second slide, the notoriously tough CFO leans forward, holds up a hand, and stops him entirely.
Oh boy.
She looks at him and asks, "What is your conviction level on these numbers?"
The ultimate high-stakes challenge. The moment where the defensive instinct usually takes over.
James doesn't panic. He pauses. One deliberate, silent beat, and he says, "Hi, I've stress-tested the model and I stand behind it."
Wow.
The board approved his pitch unanimously.
What is so deeply inspiring about James's story is that the knowledge had always been there. The numbers didn't change from his first draft to his final pitch, but the confidence language had finally matched his actual expertise.
Which brings us to our final takeaway for this deep dive. The goal of these 12 techniques is not to put on a mask. It's not to perform a fake confidence that you don't really feel. The goal is simply to let the confidence and the expertise that you already have come through the language rather than being hidden by it. Stop hiding your hard-earned knowledge behind apologies and hedges. Serve that gourmet meal on the fine china it absolutely deserves.
And as you go into your next work week, I want to leave you with this final provocative thought to ponder. The next time you speak up in a meeting, take a moment to listen to yourself and ask, are my words delivering my expertise, or are they apologizing for it?
That is such a powerful question to keep in mind. Well, that wraps up our look into the mechanics of confident professional English. But we certainly aren't done exploring how language shapes our reality. I want to explicitly tease our next deep dive. We'll be covering modern English slang and the phrases that native speakers, especially younger native speakers, use every single day.
It's going to be a fun one.
It is the essential, vibrant language that fills the gap between formal, textbook English and real, authentic social conversation. You won't want to miss it. See you there.